Good afternoon. If everyone could take a seat, we're going to get started in just a minute. Thank you for being here.
People sit.
Thanks, Carlos. Well, welcome to the Arts and Community Healing session. Our panelists today are Carlos Gonzalez-Jaime, Christopher Blay, and Dr. Donica, I'm going to say it wrong now that we said it, Danica, Dr. Danica Franks. My name is Jessica Fuentes, and I'm the Executive Director for Kinfolk House, an arts organization just down the street from here. And I am also your moderator today. So I wanted to kind of just start with a little context. When history is presented in inaccurate ways, whether through falsehoods or omissions, it is important and necessary to address and correct it. Dialogue and action are the only ways forward to acknowledge past offenses and provide opportunities for healing and reconciliation. So one example here in Fort Worth is that in response to concerns about the romanticized scenes of Black people picking cotton in the 1930s murals at the Will Rogers Memorial Center, interpretive plaques have been installed to provide context for those images. The plaques explain that tenant farming and sharecropping did not provide opportunities for freed men and poor whites to own land, and that ultimately, field workers moved to larger towns for better work and educational opportunities. The addition of this context aims to provide a more balanced and accurate history than what is depicted in the murals alone. So in a similar vein, there are two major projects underway to develop spaces in our community to process and heal from injustice. The Fred Rouse Center for Arts and Community Healing and the National Juneteenth Museum. Carlos, if you could please give us an overview of the Transform 1012 project and the Fred Rouse Center for Arts and Community Healing.
Hello, everybody. Thank you for being here. It's such an honor being along with you guys. So Transform 1012 is literally transforming a former Ku Klux Klan auditorium into a center for arts and community healing. I always say that community healing is in our last name, so we need to better do something about that. And we are a coalition of 9 local grassroots organizations and entities, and we're working together to make this happen. The center will honor the life of Mr. Fred Rouse. Fred Rouse was a Fort Worthian, a Black citizen, a father, and a husband that was lynched in Fort Worth, Texas in 1921. So we want to honor his memory and make sure that never happen again. So so the building will become from this very dark past into a center for arts and community healing. It's going to be the Fred Rouse Center for Arts and Community Healing. We are in at this moment, and here is one of our 4 principals, our architects. We're at this moment designing the building, and we are making sure, and we are very intentional in listening to the communities to understand what is healing for them, what is justice for them. And the architects, the 4 architects, we have 4 principals. Dennis Chiesa, a wonderful architect, is part of this team. So they are using this information basically to design what is going to become the Fred Rouse Center. So is that okay?
Yeah, that is very Perfect. Helpful. Could you tell us a little bit more about the community listening sessions? Like, what do these look like? How do they come about? And what are some of the findings that y'all have come to from these listening sessions?
Perfect. So I'm not an architect, and I was in a previous session, and it's like, but everybody is an artist, so I'm a frustrated artist. But when you design a space, you listen to the client, right? In this case, these 9 organizations, and the Wellman Project is going to be one of them. It, needs to talk to the architects and give them their needs. So, how many employees are we going to have? What kind of spaces we need for delivering our programs? But for us and for the architects was like we really need to make sure that not only the design fulfills the vision of these 9 organizations, but most importantly is to really understand what are the real needs of our communities. And we call communities in plural because we work with the communities that were targeted by the Klan. So the first community that comes into our mind is the Black community. But within the Black community, there are many different communities with different needs. So another important community that was targeted by the Klan because the building is in Northside is the Hispanic community. In 100 years ago, it was the Mexicans, so that live there in Northside and work at the stockyards. So listening to the different communities, there are different communities in the Hispanic. There are ones that only wants to speak Spanish, the other ones that prefer to communicate in English. So we need to understand that community. So what we did and the architects did is working with another architect. We have 4 principals, but this architect is specialized in community design. So it's absorbing this information from the communities to understand what they are, their dreams, what they want for this building to be. And so we did a lot of conversations. So like I don't know how many hours. I just see the bills from the architects, like 3 hours here, 3 hours there. But we talked to a lot of local organizations first to understand what are they doing already in social justice, what are they doing already in the arts. But then we did 2 big gatherings. We call it community conversations. And in those gatherings, there were different activities. And one of the activities that the experts called, and I learned this morning in the first panel how important it is to have experts doing things. So these experts call passive interactions. So the passive interaction, we have these little stickers or piece of papers, and we ask the community, what is justice for you? Where do you feel safe? What is healing for you? And we took all this information with experts. This architect that is specialized in community design, and they pass that information to our architects. And they are based on that, and of course the needs of the 9 tenants organization. They are using that information to design the building, and it's beautiful.
That's very exciting. Yeah, thank you for sharing a little bit about that process. And Christopher, there's been, different ideas about where the National Juneteenth Museum was going to be, and now I think that we have a site officially selected nearby. Can you tell us a little bit more about the Juneteenth Museum and about the kinds of programmings that you're developing for that institution?
Thank you. I'll start with the caveat that I'm the newest member of the National Juneteenth Museum, and by definition, the least qualified to tell you everything that you need to know about the National Juneteenth Museum. But with that caveat, I can proudly say that I am excited to be a part of that team, and I am really excited that the initiative was begun and that Fort Worth is going to be the site of the National Juneteenth Museum. We, through a city council approval, just got the final sort of permission to be situated at the corner of East Rosedale and New York Avenue. That's been widely reported, and it's part of the public record. So as far as we all know, that's where we're going to be in the middle of the historic South Side, which was a community that was founded and developed largely by William Gooseneck MacDonald, recognized as one of the first, perhaps the first Texas millionaire, black millionaire. And that community thrived for decades. And then came the sort of like bifurcation of the community by the building of Interstate 35, which intentionally divided the neighborhood from the historic South Side to the sort of medical district, Fairmount, et cetera. And then other highways were built. So it was completely choked off from the sort of like a thriving community. And with that came a lot of sort of lack of attention. And with that came the sort of like degradation of the community. So in the decision to situate in the historic South Side came this mission that is a greater part of the mission of the National Juneteenth Museum to sort of bring back, be a part of the momentum, the energy, the steam that brings back the vision of Gooseneck MacDonald, where we capitalize and build not only places for people to gather and learn history, but serve as an economic engine. And something as simple as a place for people to gather and have meals as it stands, not counting the couple of really strong and thriving mom and pop restaurants in the neighborhood. The sort of most established place in the neighborhood that you can eat is Jack in the Box. With all due deference to the cool fries and everything, it's not where you want to eat as a community. So we will have a food hall in the museum that will have the opportunities for established restaurants or startups to create that sort of food culture for the community and for the greater part of Fort Worth. We're also going to have a business incubator that connects with businesses and individuals that are trying to reestablish that footprint. There's a really beautiful 5-minute video on our website that shows our CEO, Jared Howard, walking through the neighborhood. And there's like these little beautiful sketches of what used to be there on top of literal steps to nothing. And we want to be a part of bringing that back. And so it's with that it comes with a lot of pride. I've lived in Fort Worth for many years. I sort of dipped out for 5 years to go do some things in Houston, and now I'm back and really excited to be back. As far as programming, we haven't publicly released the things that we're working on, but I can tell you that part of my drive as the director of public programs is to engage with the history of that neighborhood. It has a rich music and jazz history, which was one of the things that brought me to that neighborhood, or piqued my interest about that neighborhood in the beginning. We're gonna engage with poets, writers. We're gonna bring programs that delve into history and just sort of provide a space for the community to tell their own stories. The history of Juneteenth is not a static moment in history. It is an evolving conversation about freedom. It's an evolving conversation about America. It's an evolving conversation about American history. And we are centering ourselves in the middle of that to make sure that we love this country in all its complexities and tell all its histories so that we move forward with the kind of progress that builds the world that we want to live in.
Thank you. Well said. Yes. So as Carlos was kind of speaking to earlier, we know that environments can be designed to inspire healing. So Dr. Danica Franks, you do this kind of work through Community Flourish. And could you tell us a little bit about your work to transform healthcare environments and how these changes impact both patients and healthcare practitioners?
Absolutely. So I'm actually here in two capacities today. I'm super excited to tell you about the work that I do as a physician working in architecture and design, because that is a story. But I'm also here representing the board of Transform 1012, which I'm really excited about because I've worked with Dennis Chiesa. You may have listened in on one of the sessions over there. Dennis and I actually had a chance to put our brains together on another project where we were looking at healthcare options in the historic South Side and looking at all of the components that have been contributing to having one of the lowest life expectancies in the entire state of Texas, despite being closely adjacent to the medical district, and all of the things that kind of go into that. It was because of that work that I met Jared Howard, who actually put me in his car and drove me through the historic South Side and told me all of the wonderful stories as a Fort Worth transplant. I very carefully have been given permission to tell the histories and some of the stories of these communities that I was not a part of growing up. And one of them was learning of the beautiful history of William Gooseneck McDonald. And so there's a lot of connections that you're seeing up here on the stage and, of course, out in this audience. And that actually brings to probably the first talking point for Community Flourish, which is about intersections. So I am actually an emergency medicine physician, and I laud that proudly, I should say, because we are the most reactive kind of medicine there is, right? So when you think about emergencies, you don't know what's coming, right? You don't know what you're going to get. When you train, you actually train very broadly. So I have to be able to work with adults. I have to work with children. I have to be able to encompass the anatomy, the physiology of all of those things. And I am the expert of the first 15 minutes of any catastrophic thing that, comes your way, right? And then I hand that off to said expert, said orthopedist, said cardiologist, said neurosurgeon to complete the task and do the on-killing care. I am a first generation everything. So first generation college student, first generation medical student. I am a proud military brat, right? So I am from nowhere, although I was born in Texas, San Antonio. I've lived everywhere and spent a lot of time in a lot of different places before we came back in my teenage years and they sort of settled in San Antonio. Why is all of that relevant? Because when I walked into medical school for the very first time, my eyes were wide open and they were coming from a place of having had access to healthcare my entire life, right? There's a lot of things that the military does, and one of them is that they provide all of your social determinants of health, right? Have you ever heard of that term before? So they provide education, they provide food, they provide housing, and they provide access to healthcare. It's there, you never have to ask for it. And so for me, for the very first time training at Parkland, right, I actually went to UT Southwestern for medical school. I trained at the old Parkland, not the one that looks like it's about to take off in a spaceship right now. If you've seen the new one, it's a pretty cool building. Dennis, if you had anything to do with that, I'm not challenging it, but it does look like you're on Star Trek. All that being said, I walked in and some of the first things that I noticed was like, wow, we're taking care of patients in chairs. Right. And some of our sickest patients, I tell this story often. We had something called compassionate dialysis. Right. And if you're familiar with that, it has an intersection with whether or not you're a citizen of this United States. Let me start with that. Whether or not your kidneys work and how often you will be able to have access to dialysis. Right. Which is a thing that works best when it's scheduled. Compassionate dialysis is you come in and you do a bunch of labs and you look to see as if you're on death's door, essentially, right? And that's some of the scariest stuff you can see if you've experienced dialysis or you have persons in your family who are require or utilize dialysis. You know how important the kidneys are as a function of the body. And we were taking some of our sickest patients and seating them in chairs and running labs to see if we needed to emergently, do dialysis or whether we would send them home. And I kept staring at the chairs, looking at my fellow colleagues. And if you know anything about medical students, they're about as type A as they come, and they're there for the X's and O's, right? They want to know the physiology, the reason why somebody's sick, and how do we treat them. But I'm looking at them like, but do you see the chairs that they're sitting in? And I was met with no, empathy. No, I could care less about these chairs, right? Like, stick to the, do we do dialysis or not? And I felt for many years very different in medicine. I don't know how to really categorize that, and it's probably a conversation for a much longer time slot than what we have. But when I look back in hindsight, that was almost 20 years ago. What I realized, being first generation, having the lived experiencing of being a military kid and having access, is that medicine for me, while the fascination of the science was, I loved it. I mean, give me the physiology, give me the anatomy, I'm here for it. I missed the art, right? And the why. And I chose emergency medicine because in my eyes, that was something that mimicked what I grew up with. You never turn anyone away, right? I didn't realize how expensive it was at the time. Because again, military kid, everything's paid for. But you don't do the wallet biopsy at the door, right? So whether you have insurance or not, I'm going to see you. And even though I trained to be an expert in the first 15 minutes of anything that exists, I can also help you with your cough and cold remedies. And believe it or not, you see a lot of that in the emergency department when you shouldn't, right? That's the most expensive place to go get your runny nose addressed. Mm-hmm. So all of that being said, in my mind, I wanted, and I've always desired to understand the macro at a much bigger level. And when I dial back, as someone who is highly trained and an expert in this area, I found that the reason why those people were sitting in chairs really mattered, and that I wanted to be able to help address that, right? And my giant hypothesis as a physician working in architecture and design is that if I can shape the space where we do our work, I will get there faster in both addressing the treatment and the outcomes and the art and the why and all of the things that matter about why people are having exchanges in that room. I can probably get to it a little bit faster than I can if I stick to the straight line academia route that I was in previously. I've been a dean of students at a medical school here, and I thought I would do that for forever. That's the best way. You get to educate a lot of learners, and then their trajectory goes on forward. But for me, this is the much better macro approach to doing that. Okay, so that's the background. What am I doing? So I actually have really cool projects now that I sit on. Most of them are not in the state of Texas. I've worked on 2, so I'm actually helping to design JPS. So that's our local hospital. Many of you guys know there's a bond program that came out a long time ago, and there are multiple projects that are coming off of that. I am actually helping to redesign the towers, which are the main component of the healthcare delivery system, and I'm really excited about that, right? I also helped UT Southwestern redesign their new big children's hospital. If you're familiar off of Harry Hines, there's a $5 billion project that's going up there, right? The 2 biggest projects that I work on now, though, are at Howard University in DC and Grady Hospital in Atlanta, right? And when we pull all of those things together, when I am brought into the room, what I'm asked to do is to help them with the real technicalities. So operations, what do we do in those spaces, right? The ORs, the emergency departments. I'm also asked to help them think about the learning that happens there, because all of these individual spaces are academic centers, and that's really, really important. But what they don't know and what they're getting is that I am also filtering that through the lens of something that is really, really hard in medicine, and that is how many people on this side of medicine who are not doing well up here. Mental health is a really big deal. And the numbers tell us this. If you start your training, right, so you've gone to college, however many years, you go into medical school, you come in with rates of depression, rates of anxiety, you name it, diagnoses that are about the same as most, or if not even lower, of your peers that are going into other graduate programs, right? PhD programs, you name it. By the time learners hit their 2nd or 3rd year of training in medicine, those rates have skyrocketed. And what we know about that is that the learning environment, of which the built environment sits entirely within, is to blame, right? And it's the culture, it's the experiences, it's the expectations, and overwhelmingly, it's the dehumanization of what you're expected to become as a physician by the time you land, right? I often say, these are my words, that you're asked to become a soldier. It's how do you take a person and make them into a soldier? There's an equivalent of how do you start off as a physician, as a person, and create a physician. You have to go through a lot of things that, almost they discipline you in ways that are hard. So I'm looking at these spaces and thinking about, okay, when I was training, I would go to the bathroom to cry or the hallway, right? Or the stairwell. It is nothing to walk into a stairwell and hear somebody trying to silently cry about the really crazy things that you just seen. Now we're looking at spaces that are, decompression spaces. They exist. You go in there, you have a moment. We normalize that. That is a part of taking care of a mom who just burned her 3 children, right? I need to be able to care for that mom and those children, and I need a minute to go process the fact that this is really hard. You understand what I'm saying? So that is the work that I'm doing. There's a lot of ways to look at that. The last thing that I'll say, I don't know how many of you raised your hands to lifelong learning. Okay, I raised 2 hands and 2 feet to that. One of the things that I've recently taken on, and I'm going to give you guys my ideation, I'm not an expert in this, is I did not realize how intertwined art and science were. This extraction of art and science is only a couple hundred years old, right? It used to be that astrology and astronomy sat side by side, right? That alchemy and chemistry sat side by side, because what the art does is it gives you the meaning behind the science, right? Or I'm guessing right. And I think that that's really what's influenced the work that I'm getting to do on the board. Carlos has graciously asked me to join the building committee. And I can't wait to sit next to this gentleman over here because he's a brilliant mind, so we can see what we can come up with. It's going to be important for something like a space of healing to think through the bones and how that impacts the physicality, the anatomy, the physiology of how we as humans engage in that space, right? And I think it's brilliant that there's a very intersectional approach to a lot of the things that we're doing, because believe it or not, it takes that, right, in order to have a really good outcome. So high level, that's what I'm doing. Lots of other fun things to discuss, but I know we've got more things to say before we wrap up.
Yeah, thank you so much for sharing. It's really fascinating. And as you're saying, art is a powerful tool. It allows people to express their identities, their histories, their values and experiences, and all of that can be validating, and it can also foster understanding. So through storytelling, communities can share their narratives and histories that may be lesser known or previously excluded from the broader telling of history. So the arts can help to raise awareness about social injustices and historical grievances, prompting conversations that lead to change and reparation efforts. So Christopher, can you tell us a little bit about your recently revealed public art piece at East Rosedale Monument Project?
That we all drove by?
That you all
And smiled hard when we drove by
Yeah.
it? Yes, hopefully you saw it.
And tell us a little bit about how the transit bus has played a key role in the fight for justice and equality.
I first want to say that I can't wait to see what the chairs are going to look like in your building, because I think, we're all with bated breath. The East Rosedale Monument Project was a 10-year journey, not by design, but by, circumstances. It started as a submission. I applied for one of the available public art projects that were tied to the bond package for East Rosedale. And the sort of prompt was to create something somewhere between I-35 and 287 on Rosedale. And so part of the process was driving the neighborhood and just kind of thinking about possibilities. And we were interviewed and asked about our approach to the project, and without any specifics, just sort of proposed this idea that I wanted to create something that focused on gathering people, because a little bit before the time that I applied, I was an assistant photo editor at the Fort Worth Star-Telegram, which was my big job after college. And right at the cusp of the transition from analog photography to digital photography, and everyone trying to figure out what a website did and what it meant for a newspaper. So we were all given digital video cameras and told to go create stories. That's the only prompt. So I always had this fascination. This is sort of a winding response, but it'll get back to the core of this thing. But it just kind of speaks to how I got to this neighborhood, how I found interest in this neighborhood. And it was my fascination with the island of Zanzibar. I'd seen pictures, I've never been there, it's on my bucket list. And so in the early sort of Google iteration, I was looking for images and stories about Zanzibar. And one thing that popped up was a place called Club Zanzibar in Fort Worth. I was like, what? There's a Zanzibar club in Fort Worth? So I started looking, and I knew it was in this neighborhood, but I couldn't figure out where it was. And I kept walking up and down, and I finally found the place. And I was like, okay, so this is something interesting. So that was sort of my initial push into the neighborhood. And then I spent more time, just sort of started learning a little bit about the neighborhood. And when I was given that camera to do a story, I interviewed people in the historic South Side. I went to the barber shop. There was a lady that lived at the corner of 35 in Rosedale. Her house is no longer there. She's no longer alive. But she told me about the history of the neighborhood, how there, used to be businesses around here, restaurants, grocery stores, and she just lived there her whole life. And now that building is not there anymore, just the steps to where her building used to be. So that was my initial sort of introduction to the neighborhood. So when I got to propose a project, I knew that I wanted something really visible, and by design, it had to be somewhere along the stretch of Rosedale. And I thought, why not make a bus stop out of a bus, which is where my mind usually just goes, playing with language and materials. But then I didn't want to stop there. So my research kind of led to thinking about the history of buses. Like, I don't just want to build something that looks like a bus as a bus stop and stop there. So it immediately went to thinking about the history of transit buses in the U.S. Civil Rights Movement, from the Freedom Riders to, the Montgomery bus boycott, busing for integration, and just the role of buses in this neighborhood and the lack of access to that kind of public transportation. So all those stories are embedded in that monument, and I call it a monument project and not just a monument because in previous iterations and concepts of monuments, we've always thought of this sort of static, monolithic, person, thing, element, but it is an evolving story. It is part of the evolving American project. So the East Rosedale Monument Project is just that. It's a place, a rest stop on the path to a greater, sort of like tapping into our better angels and becoming the place we want to be and becoming the community that we want to be. So it's this, and as you're situated in that space, you're thinking about history, but you're also thinking about the future.
Thank you. So we just have a few minutes left, and there's so much still that could be discussed. And I want to open it up to questions so that if anyone in the audience has questions for our speakers, there's a little bit of time for that. Do we have any questions? Go first.
I'll go. So there are different components on the Fred Rouse Center. We are going to have a small theater, a medium-sized theater, 400 seats. As you know, we are filling the space, the gap that the Scott Theater is going to left or it's going to leave in the city. So there's going to be rehearsal spaces for two different companies. One is a folk dance company, and the other one is a contemporary dance and performance dance. So in one of the panels is ask what is the biggest challenge of the arts right now in Fort Worth, and they say spaces. So what we're doing with the Fred Rouse Center is bringing new spaces for artists and the community to enjoy the arts and to heal a city and their community. So I think more than gentrify, what we want is to really make those communities stronger. And I think it's the same for the Juneteenth Museum. But what we want to do is really to bring infrastructure to the community, not only to Northside, but to Fort Worth and to the arts community, spaces for them to make their art and spaces for the community. We're going to have a maker space. The Wellman Project is responsible for that. They're already doing that kind of programs, and those spaces are for the community to develop new skills and to use those spaces for their benefit. We hope that instead of seeing that as a negative, we want really to be part of the economic development of the area.
All those things.
Can I just add a quick comment?
Mhm.
I think that's a really hard question, and I was contemplating it, not having insight as to either plans currently. So I'm going to speak for myself. I almost honestly would love to lob that question back out to the audience, because it really requires a case study of looking at who's done that well, right? And how do you prevent that from happening? And I applaud the question, because it's important. If we displace, right, those who have lived in the community for X amount of time, whether they were the originals or whether they were also another iteration of that, how successful are we being in what we're trying to accomplish, right? So it's not an answer, but I think it's an acknowledgement that deserves a study, right? Who's done that well? How did they do it? What did it take? Because it really, in my mind, collaboration. It has to be, advocacy at the city level. It has to be advocacy with what's being developed in that area. These entities get a chance to look at the specific site of what they're doing, but the bigger picture is lesser controlled, right? Mm-hmm. And so I applaud the question. Don't know the answer, but I think it's for all of us to lean in on that.
And I will add, I did just recently write an article about 3 organizations in San Antonio that are doing this kind of work, have been doing this kind of work to fight off gentrification. They're all arts organizations, mm-hmm. and they each have different approaches, and that's it, right? Like, they're each doing different things to support the community in different ways, but coming together as a collaborative force, they've been able to do some of that work.
Okay, so lit search number 1, right? This is a literature search, right?
Yeah, and some of that is through like Esperanza Peace and Justice Center, which has a land trust that it's created over the last couple of years for residents to be able to save their homes. The Guadalupe Cultural Arts Center, which has been purchasing commercial buildings in the neighborhood before outsiders can do that. And then San Anto Cultural Arts, which is a long-standing youth empowerment organization that works with students to create murals, to have a community newspaper, and to not only use the arts to help support the community, but to help the students and the young people learn skills that they can use as they get older and become advocates for their own neighborhood. So
I will add that we are very lucky that the Fred Rouse Center, which is in Main Street between the courthouse and the stockyards, so we are going to be the gateway to Northside Historic District. In Northside, it's in a program right now called Main Street America, So Main Street America, it's a national program to help historic district to revitalize and avoid gentrification. So we are lucky because we're working with these experts, again, experts important, to make sure that not only know the local businesses, but the most important, the local communities, the neighbors are not displaced. And they have done a lot of studies, and in one of the surveys, which was I think more than 400 people completed that survey. The number one thing that the community wants is arts and culture, and we feel pretty. I mean, happy that we're one of those, and we're gonna offer that. So hopefully we're not gonna displace anybody. And again, we're working with Northside, his historic district, in making sure that doesn't happen. So
Thank you. Do we have maybe one more question? Oh, yeah. It's in. Yeah.
Oh, sorry. Participate. Your presence here today alone is testament to that. But there are volunteer opportunities at both our institutions. There are volunteer opportunities in the neighborhood that we're actively um, uh, encouraged not to gentrify. Our experts are the residents, so we listen to them closely, and it's not just a passive listening environment. It's a take notes and find the things that we can do immediately and find the things that we can do as we grow. And I think being a part of those things are like really important. You know, working with people in the community to find ways to elevate their voices through your agency. Like saying, I talked to the folks here at the Southside Community Center, and they said that you should really pay attention to this thing. You can do that. You don't need a degree to do that, and you don't need anyone's permission to just sort of be present. And every action builds towards the thing that we all want. So that's where I would encourage you to start.
in the case of Transform 1012, we do have one of our coalition organizations is 1012 Youth Council, and it's very young people from, I think our youngest is 13 years old to 26. So they are doing amazing things, and they also are working with board members, and the board members train them to have their own board organization. So the president of the youth council sits in our board, and they have a voice, which is very important. It's not only that we have presence, but they decide what is going to happen at the future Fred Rouse Center. So being part of that organization will be great. And as a commercial, in your bags you have a flyer from Transform 1012. So in
In the tote bag.
exactly, yeah. So there is a code there, so you can go and volunteer also in our organization. Thank you, and thank you for wanting to participate. That's amazing.
Thank you. Well, we are out of time. It is time for our lunch break. Boxed lunches will be set up downstairs for those of you that pre-purchased lunch, and for event participants, lunches are provided. You're welcome to enjoy them wherever you would like, on the lawn, in Gina's Cafe, or back up here, or head off campus and support a local eatery here on the east side. There are a handful of extra box lunches, so if you would still like to purchase one, you can do so downstairs. And then we'll see people back here at 1 p.m. to hear from Mayor Maddie Parker, Bob Jameson, the president and CEO of Visit Fort Worth, and our keynote speaker all the way from Washington, D.C., Randy Cohen. Enjoy your lunch.
Thank you.
Thank you.